I get exposed to a lot of risk mitigating technology every day. And the insurance industry has not done a very good job of figuring out how to really monetize and implement risk mitigating technology.
Right? How concerned is the producer with making sure that their customers are safe as opposed to saving $5 per unit, right?
We have the ability to look at the traffic lights and stop signs for you, and then decide whether you're coming too quickly to stop, that we know it's ahead of you, and then give you the warning.
You know, if you're a producer out there, too many times you're focused on price, and I've said this a million times, you really need to be focusing on cost. And if you can take the conversation and transfer it to cost, it's a much softer term, and it actually encompasses a lot more.
You mentioned the ability to detect early on signs of risky behavior is extremely important. Most of the solutions that are implemented today tend not to react right away, or they overreact without understanding the context. That's the biggest problem.
Even AI will not replace radiologists, but radiologists that use AI and machine learning will replace those who do not. And I think that holds true everywhere.
Too many times we don't look at active and passive retained losses as part of what we do, but the reality is that's a major component of total cost of risk that often producers don't even think about. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game. And one of the ways we do that, as you all know, is we bring you cutting-edge technology that you can use with your clients at the point of sale to help them reduce their total cost of risk and increase your ability to close deals. Because guess what? If you're listening to this podcast, you're already ahead of the curve. You're a forward-thinking, technology-adopting agent, and you want to do those things that are going to give you an advantage at the point of sale. And the guests that we have today are going to help you do that. We have the team from Drive, which is an amazing product that I first heard about at InsurTech Insights in 2023 in New York City. Now, I got to tell you, it was kind of a weird situation because that's when we had the massive Canadian dust cloud that was infiltrating everything. And I walked out of my hotel room and thought that I was on the set of Red Dawn, or I'm sorry, Total Recall, rather, with Arnold Schwarzenegger, the first one. It was like we were on Mars. It was crazy how everything was. And then the next day, all of a sudden, it was gone. So anyhow, I got to meet the team that was there. I heard about the technology. I was excited about the technology, and I'm excited today to bring it to you almost 2 years later to find out all of the things that have happened since then so that we can be up to speed. And we're going to talk a lot about how you can help improve fleet safety in your accounts using their product. So with me today are Frank Sentner, Roberto Sicconi, and believe it or not, we've got Giancarlo Stanton on the podcast, and he is ready to bring the heat. So before we get started, I want everybody just to take a quick second. We'll start with you, Frank, and we'll go in the order that I introduced you, Frank, then Roberto, then Giancarlo. Just do us a quick favor, introduce yourselves, kind of talk about a little bit about how you got involved with Drive, what your role is there, and then we're going to be off to the races talking about the product itself and what it's doing to change the face of risk management and fleets.
Thank you, David. Frank Sentner here. I've been in the insurance technology space for 48 years. About 12 years ago, I pivoted my consulting practice from fee-for-service to equity-for-service because I wanted to work with startups. And I focus exclusively on startups that are available and useful to the production side of the business, our distribution side. And I met Roberto and Maggie, who are the co-founders of Drive, at an event that we held here in Hartford. And I was really blown away by the technology. But at the time, they were focused on insurance carriers. As a lot of my startups have experienced, they didn't get a lot of traction there. And so they've pivoted to working with MGAs, MGUs, and even with agents directly. So I am a senior advisor and happy to be part of this team.
All right, my name is Roberto Sicconi. Yeah.
Go ahead, Roberto.
Yeah, my name is Roberto Sicconi. I spent about 25 years with IBM, half in Europe, half in the States, mostly in research roles. I managed a number of very interesting products. My passion is human machine interfaces, anything that can be done to use technology to help make people's life better. I also have a passion for cars, in general, driving. So at some point, I was leading the activity between IBM and many major car manufacturers to understand how distracted driving can be avoided whilst driving and enhance safety. So that's where I used all my experience in speech recognition, image processing, video processing to the benefit of the connection between the car or the truck and the driver. And then as I left IBM after a stint as a program director of the Watson team, I decided to put in some AI on top of it and create the solution that we have today.
All right. I'm
Okay.
Giancarlo Stanton. I am an attorney by training, but I do not practice law anymore. I got my start in insurance with ACE, and then they became Chubb. I saw the writing on the wall, and so I went into private practice, did some complex commercial litigation around insurance and complex claims, which brought me over to the insurtech side of the world. I spent some time as Swift's general counsel and VP of claims. From there, over to a company called CoverWhale, which focused on commercial auto, as their chief operating officer. And from there, I met Drive, and I also spawned my current baby, which is Magic, an insurtech focused on back-end insurtech ops, but focused on Drive right now. They have been a fascinating team to work with, and so I've spent the last, I think, 2+ years, Roberto, is that right? Spending as much time as possible just trying to learn and help them grow.
Good deal. So I know, Roberto, you have background in, technology in outside of the insurance industry, which is seems to be vast. Frank has legendary technology experience inside the insurance industry. Talk a little bit about what it's been like to get Drive off the ground. What was the initial vision behind the product that we see today? What led you to believe, what did you see that we see every day as producers and agents that's a problem that you could help us solve? Because one of the things that we talk about specifically on my podcast is we got to get away from selling products and focus on solving problems. If you can solve a problem, the product side's easy. Anybody that's able to go in and sit through pre-licensing curriculum and take a test and pass it can get an insurance license. But it doesn't necessarily mean they can look deep enough to solve problems. So talk a little bit about that, because I think that's going to be the meat of what people want to hear. Because you may see a problem that a lot of people who are newer producers don't even realize exists yet. And we want to make sure we educate them on why what you're doing is important.
I would like Frank to go first, because I think there's two aspects. One is the problem the insurance is facing. The other one is the problem from a driver perspective, assuming that we want to focus on them, and why human beings are exceptional in many respects, but not the good at being reliable over time, and how the technology can help close the gap so that insurance companies have a better view of the riskiness of drivers and can provide more competitive products. But I really like Frank to start first and then interject how we can help with that.
So we're doing age before beauty. Okay. So one of the things that drew me to Maggie and Roberto's solution, Drive, is I get exposed to a lot of risk mitigating technology every day. And the insurance industry has not done a very good job of figuring out how to really monetize and implement risk mitigating technology. And in the final analysis, you can sell somebody an insurance product, but if you make them safer, you're going to have a very sticky relationship. In particular, I was aware for many years of the challenges associated with commercial automobile insurance, and more specifically with trucking. And we're in the midst of a crisis in New York City of the unavailability of insurance entirely for liveries, for taxis, for Airbnb. I mean, not for Airbnb, for Uber and Lyft. And, what really drew me to Maggie and Roberto was their passion was how to make drivers safer. They really understand the space of vehicle technology. And, we've been hearing for years that we were going to have self-driving cars, and that's not on the horizon for a long time to come. The much safer alternative is a human-machine interface that allows the driver to have a co-pilot. that allows the driver to, take advantage of the power of AI and the power of video cameras that are looking out at the threats of the world, and also taking note of whether the driver's attention is focused on them or not. That in the cab, real-time coaching is what makes the difference. And, so what I saw with Maggie and Roberto's product was astonishing, and for me, and that's why I wanted to be involved.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. Number one, if you're a producer out there, too many times you're focused on price. And I've said this a million times, you really need to be focusing on cost. And if you can take the conversation and transfer it to cost, it's a much softer term, and it actually encompasses a lot more. When you focus on price, you focus on premium, and there's a floor to that. There's only so low you're going to be able to get it. And if you're not going outside of that to focus on the other factors that are driving the financials of the companies you're going after, then you're really missing the boat, because there are so many things that go into your total cost of risk aside from just the premium, that the average agent is only going to go where they've always gone. It's an opportunity to really differentiate yourself. The other thing I would comment based on what I just heard is, the automotive industry knows this is a problem too. And the problem is they haven't really figured out how to fix it yet. And, the only thing that I'm aware of right now that is native to any kind of a vehicle is an alert that you get if you've been behind the wheel for a specified period of time, right? So maybe if I'm on a road trip and I've been driving continuously for an hour and a half or 2 hours, I honestly don't know what that time frame is. My steering wheel will vibrate. I'll get an audio, cue or whatever that says, hey, it might be a good time to pull over, take a break, go get a cup of coffee, walk around. Maybe it can tell if you're tired or whatever, and your car might be moving back and forth inside your lane. But what about the person that should never have gotten behind the wheel to begin with because they just pulled an all-nighter and they're trying to get home, but home's 45 minutes away and they're drifting off to sleep 15 minutes into the trip? That person's probably not going to be identified by something like that. But yet I know that this product is designed specifically to identify things like that. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But Roberto, I'm interested in your comments on what Frank said at this point. Since you deferred to him first, I'm expecting absolute gold from you now.
Well, I think there's a lot that can be done there, and also a solution right now embodies many of the ideas that came up from different areas, including our own. I think what you mentioned, the ability to detect early on signs of risky behavior is extremely important. Most of the solutions that are implemented today tend not to react right away, or they overreact without understanding the context. That's the biggest problems. Even some of the high-end solutions you can buy today on high-end cars can detect whether you are distracted, you are drowsy, but that may be sort of irrelevant if you are driving in an empty highway. If you are in thick traffic and very close to hitting somebody who cut your lane and you're not looking at it, even a slight distraction can be fatal. So the important thing is to understand what is the environment around you, how much risk are you getting into, willingly or not, and whether you are aware of it. Based on that, we can decide how to intervene. And that could be a minute after you left the trip, or could be 3 hours into the trip because you're starting to slack off. So the time alone doesn't tell you the story. The fact you're driving at night penalizes expert drivers who like driving at night. But that's one of the things the insurance like to check. So we try to have a more fair, a more comprehensive, a more reactive solution that can help you on the spot, and not to just tell you after the fact that you shouldn't have done this. No, as you start getting to risk, you get the warnings, and the warnings turn into alerts if you don't react quickly. And that also creates a profile that tells you and your fleet manager, for instance, or your insurer, what kind of a driver you are, and then you can monitor yourself and evaluate your progress over time, which is equally important.
Giancarlo, I've got a question for you, and I understand that you're not practicing, and so I want to put a disclaimer on this. I'm not necessarily asking for legal advice, but just theory maybe behind some of this, because I feel like if you've got a tool like Drive in your vehicles and show that you've done your due diligence to do the best that you can to prevent things like this, it can probably benefit you should, God forbid, you get into a situation you need to defend yourself and maybe remove some of the accusations of negligence as the person that's employing these drivers. I mean, what do you think about that from a general perspective?
From a general, not legal advice perspective, I think that the pros outweigh the cons in terms of, being able to say that you took measures to improve driver safety. I think if you take a step back and think about, your comment to, should producers be thinking about cost beyond price? Frankly, it's a question of, does even the producer want to be proactive, right? How concerned is the producer with making sure that their customers are safe as opposed to saving $5 per unit, right? I don't think you quite get to like an E&O question, but like on some level, if the standard of care is actually like, here is how you make sure that you're running a tight ship. Here's how you manage, how many days is the fleet actually on the road, as opposed to just, is it insured, not insured, but you drive over potholes like an idiot and you end up with the truck sitting at $1,500, a day of, sitting and waiting to get it repaired. That adds up too, right? So I think when you think about technology like this, the expression I heard a while ago, and this is working with a health tech, so out of left field, but the expression that was said to me was, AI will not replace radiologists, but radiologists that use AI and machine learning will replace those who do not. And I think that holds true everywhere. I don't think it's a question of like, what is the legal standard for using a tool like Drive? It's how do you tell your client that you're advocating for them and getting them the best package, getting them the best price, getting them the best actual risk management product and or suite, and you leave on the table the ability to remind their driver that like, yeah, you probably should not drive while falling asleep. If that's not in your arsenal or your tool bag as a producer, I think that's where you're leaving a lot on the table. And then yes, obviously you get to a limits loss type of event, candidly, like you're probably not having a conversation about like, what is the Hail Mary there? Do I think it helps? It could, but I think the real question is like, how do you improve your fleet outcomes 364 days a year, as opposed to that, one time you have something catastrophic like that? That's how I would think about it. It's about improving outcomes on the average day, not just trying to save the day on like the worst day of your life.
Yeah, and I think, you asked the question somewhat rhetorically, but I'm going to be a little bit in your face to the producers about it, because the reality is too many of them are scared to bring solutions up because they're worried that their client won't want to do business with them at all because of the added cost that is perceived by bringing something like this in. What it really amounts to is you're an insurance salesman, not an actual trusted advisor, and you only know one aspect of the game, and you really need to be a 5-tool player out there that's talking about these other things. Because if you're worth your salt in production, you're going to understand that you have the ability to go to your underwriter and your carrier to get credits. And if you're any good at negotiating at all, you're going to offset a portion, if not all, of the investment cost through credits. Or if you have a fleet that's, big enough and it's taking some sort of a deductible on the liability side, there's a lot of things in there too that you're going to be able to protect your client's money that's inside the deductible layer. Too many times we don't look at active and passive retained losses as part of what we do, but the reality is that's a major component of total cost of risk that often producers don't even think about. So the answer is, yeah, go ahead.
I think what you said is spot on. I think, not to be too controversial, I think too many producers think of themselves as being focused on selling an insurance product, as opposed to being an actual advisor on sort of a general risk and safety front. And as a result, like, yeah, if you are selling a single product, then, that is what you're selling, and let's own that. But I think to your point, there is so much more that goes into this. And hell, I don't know how you go to an underwriter and say, I want a rate reduction, without saying to that underwriter, here is what we're doing to actually drive outcomes. It's not just shave 5% because you owe me for the cocktails last year, right? Like, it is actually based on, here's why this fleet is better than the next fleet you're going to underwrite. How do you say that with a straight face if you're not actually helping that fleet be better?
Right. And it's one of the things that we talk about here, specifically with my team, but I also talk about it inside my online community. Don't tell me what you're going to do. Show me what you're doing. Okay. Everybody's going to check all of the right answers on the Accord form, thinking that's what's going to get it pushed through. But if you take that extra time and can actually show the underwriter, hey, I'm not just blowing smoke. This is something that's real. It's something that we execute on a daily basis. Oh, and by the way, let me just throw in my agency's loss runs so you can see the loss ratio that we operate on specific to fleet across our entire book of business, because that's how you get deals done with underwriters that other people aren't going to get done. You can only be silver-tongued to a certain degree. I want to shift for just a second because I think that something else is really important to sort of lay down is, somewhat of the foundation of what's going on here. And that is the change in the way that commerce has done in the US now. We have really shifted. If you don't have a defunct shopping mall where you live, then I haven't, you must be in small town USA and that's the only place people can go get stuff. But if you live in a metropolis, like where I live in the metropolitan Tampa Bay area, we are passing or getting passed by Amazon and FedEx, and Chris Paradiso's counting every penny he's making off of that program. Yeah. But, a program like this, a solution like this is perfect for what Paradiso does with his last mile delivery program. But I mean, the exposure for fleet or even for private passenger auto is so much different because we're not going to bricks and mortar stores anymore. We're using the convenience of Amazon. And I mean, we even have the 1 hour drone delivery down here right now, but we're at a point where I can't leave my house. If I go to Orlando or if I go south toward Bradenton, Sarasota, these facilities that Amazon has built right around us. I mean, we've got like 5 or 6 of them that are like small cities when you drive past them. And I have to believe, that's not an easy fleet to manage from a safety standpoint. It's not an easy thing to get your arms around as an underwriter, but having a tool like this specifically, I have to believe gives a comfort level to all parties involved that might not be there otherwise.
Well, I think, to your point earlier, there's a reason why I think about this in terms of like an everyday solution and not in terms of like true cat exposure type events, right? Because you take someone driving, a U-Haul when they normally drive a Subaru, and you ask them to pull into the family, driveway and not touch anything, and like things get touched with that vehicle, right? And so it is those small attritional losses that absolutely crush fleets and absolutely crush programs. And so it's a lot of CYA type advice that, remind people to check whether or not they can actually clear the overhang, as it were. That goes a lot further on your loss run than trying to avoid some sort of catastrophic collision.
Go ahead, Frank.
I think that it would be helpful at this point to sort of level set for your audience what we're talking about in terms of this product. Okay.
Absolutely.
So
100%.
This thing here, the giant mainframe that I carry around in my pocket, is what the software runs on. It uses the front and back camera. All it needs is a place to be mounted, up near the dash where the camera can see the driver and the camera can see out the windshield. It is fully packed with all of the AI video analytics, as well as all the telematics, very sophisticated telematics that drive the decision-making on coaching the driver. It's not only coaching the driver, it's also tracking everything they do on that trip. Every incident where there's hard braking, hard cornering, too close calls, everything, all the threats that normally present themselves to drivers. And at the end of the trip, it provides the driver or the fleet manager with or the insurer for that matter, MGA, MGU, with a trip report. Now that trip report can be after every trip. It can be once a day. It can be once a week. It can be once a month. It can be in the aggregate. It can tell who the drivers are, because there's a picture and it has the driver's face. It can tell what vehicle you're in because it's registered, with the driver. And, all of that feedback is available from this device, from the phone, and you can upload what you need to the cloud, but there's no exposure beyond the phone unless it's configured to transmit the videos and or the other data to the cloud, except for the analytics that are developed from Drive. So, and we're talking about something for the owner operator that's $17 a month. That's what the app costs. It's just an app. You download it to your phone and you get, all of that capabilities. Now, of course, there's enterprise pricing for larger fleets, but that's the price point we're talking about. This is the level of complexity involved. All you need to do is download an app, put it on a holder in your windshield, and you're off to the races.
So here's the thing. This is what I just heard. And producers, I'm really hoping you heard the same thing. $17 a month is negligible money, number one. But number two, when you hear that this is not just like a bolt-on, it actually is giving you the telematics and the GPS stuff that you're already likely paying for from another provider. So you aren't necessarily looking to sell somebody an additional product. You're looking to redirect money they're already spending on something to buy something that's better than what they already have because they don't have this.
No. And the advantage of it being mobile on a mobile device is you can use it for a whole bunch of other things. You get appliances delivered from any one of the big box stores, right? It's not the big box store's drivers. It's not the big box store's trucks. It's a third party. It's probably even a subcontractor to a third party. And they go in with their individual private phones and video the setup before and after so they can prove that they did a good job of installing it. You also have the need to inspect trucks, right? And you're supposed to have a record of that. You can do that with the phone, walking around. The device even has the capability of measuring the depth of your tread. So all of the compliance things that you need to do can also be bundled in, geo tagged, and time and date stamped along with the trip. So you know what's being done. It is a comprehensive solution for $17 a month.
Well, the other thing that I think about, and I mean, you guys are probably way down the road with something like this too, because I'm the dumbest guy on this call, which means I'm in the right call. But I look at it for youthful drivers and parents and having a peace of mind that 16 or 17-year-old kid that you're going to, let's call it what it is. Cars aren't cheap anymore. I remember I got my first car for under $1,000. I don't even know that that's humanly possible, but what keeps me awake at night more than anything else is knowing that I have a kid that's out driving around in a vehicle. And it's not even my vehicle I'm worried about. I'm worried about the life of my child and the damage that they could inflict on somebody else as a non-experienced driver. This is, in my mind, a great way, number one, to keep track of where your kids are and what they're doing, but more importantly, giving them ongoing coaching. I think that a lot of times we send kids to driver's ed, we give them a driver's license, we turn them loose on the road, and then there's no continuing education on how to do that. And I'm going through this right now with my middle son who, is working towards getting his driver's license. But I mean, even the other day, we were leaving the office and I drive a Ram pickup truck and it had been raining out. And he's like, hey, what do you think about me driving home? I said, I think that it would be better if you want to learn on wet roads when we're out in the country somewhere instead of driving from the office to the house. I said, because what you don't know is that there's no weight in the back of a pickup truck and I could fishtail around almost any corner or curve going home and you don't have the experience necessary to correct that if it happens. And so we got in the truck, I drove, and guess what I did? I intentionally fishtailed around a couple corners just so he could see how the back end of the truck slides out. A moment of education, right? But yeah. I think that too many times we just set it and forget it and, live like I'm sure that I have some level of stress in my life that's deteriorating my life expectancy because I have youthful drivers in my home. And this would give me a peace of mind that's worth every penny of $17 a month. And I'm not even, I don't even have a big fleet. I have 2 cars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the challenges of a product like this because we're having trouble figuring out what's the best target market because it really, at this price point and with this level of sophistication and security, privacy for your data, it's really hard to decide where to sell it. But Drive doesn't really have the capacity to sell to every individual parent, right?
Right.
That's one of the reasons for turning to the insurance industry as a channel partner. So, Roberto, you had something?
Yeah, no, we actually a few months ago we released a special version for teenagers, exactly to address and the aspects that you highlighted. In that particular case, we deliberately turn off the videos, but they are can be enabled upon request from the parent and the kid approving. So we can have the full functionality or limited functionality depending on how much you want to be perceived as sneaking into your kids' behavior, but the behavior itself may tell you how much you need to know. So you can turn that on later if needed.
Yeah,
I
a
think
lot
one
of
of
the
the
telematics. I'm sorry, Giancarlo?
I was just say I think one of the funniest things about Drive, and I experienced this in my prior role sitting on the MGA side of the house, is that we would get corrections to the drivers that said, hey, you should do XYZ differently, right? And we would get all sorts of obscenity from the driver telling us, they've been driving for however many years and they know what the hell they're doing. And then you look at the data for the next 3 weeks and it's like, guess what? Yeah, you told us to go pound sand, but you also slowed down by 4.5 miles per hour, and you had 30% fewer unsafe. So like you can envision your 18-year-old kid saying, I don't need to be told how to drive. And you can envision a 45-year-old truck driver saying, I don't need to be told how to drive. But empirically, I can tell you, like, we've watched the driver tell us to go shove it and then actually do what we told them to do. So the funny thing is, like, no one wants to be told they're not the world's best driver. But the act of telling them that what they're doing is unsafe in the moment does actually have a corrective value, even if it's not what they want to hear in that moment in time.
Yeah. And it's better if it's coming from the machine, believe it or not. And it's always better to give people corrective information in the moment. Human beings don't learn very well from things that are told to them later on. And so if you're alerting them, and especially if the alerts are contextual, that's a huge difference here. When you're going just by telematics, you can't tell if the hard braking event that you've detected is good hard braking or bad hard braking. Did you just avoid running over the lady with the baby carriage because she stepped off the curb? Or were you following too close behind that car and therefore you were the cause of the hard braking event? The same is true for everything else. It sounds trite, but if you're going only by telematics, you are flying blind.
Well, I can give you firsthand experience with that because my own auto insurer at one time had a device that you plugged in so that they could monitor how you drive. And the reality is number one, I felt more distracted because I wasn't driving to naturally drive safe. I was driving to not hear the beep. And in some cases, that wasn't the best thing because I knew every time that thing beeped, it was recording that I did something that was going to make my premium go up. And to prove the point, it was actually more incentive for me to run a red light or a stale yellow as opposed to hit the brakes hard to stop and not go through the intersection because I was going to get nailed for hard braking when in reality, that's what I should have done. You don't get an opportunity to explain that. It just gets recorded. It gets, marked against you or whatever. And then you end up, paying the difference in premium for being a safe driver or a not safe driver. But, and look, reality is you shouldn't be approaching intersections too quickly to where you have to hard brake, but not all yellow lights are created equal either. Sometimes we have some that are long, and if it's in the town you live in, which ones are longer than others, and you can get away with that. But the reality that proves your point 100% because the carrier thinks that they're incenting you to drive safer when the reality is in that exact scenario, you're actually putting yourself at a greater risk to not make the thing beep to ding against you than you would just running through a stale yellow or a red light.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really sophisticated features, and I'd love to have Roberto talk a little bit about the kinds of things that he's implemented, the kinds of things where weather comes into play, where tracking routes so you can get comparisons, not just on different drivers running routes, but also on routes where you need to take greater care because drivers overall have challenges. Can you talk a little bit about all of those kinds of things that you've incorporated?
Yeah, some of the information comes from digital maps we're using. Some roads are known to have a propensity to create crashes, to cause crashes, like rollover risks or so, or the car sliding in bad weather conditions. We know what the weather looks like, so we can anticipate that you might be on potentially slippery roads or even icy conditions, and that changes all the margins in providing you warnings so that you don't. You're not allowed to drive as fast as you normally do, simply because we know already the weather is not recommending that. We have the ability to detect when you do a stop rollover, for instance, and some people do it routinely. It doesn't mean that you get into crash every time, but it just raises the risk, and then you can be reminded of it. We have the ability to look at the traffic lights and stop signs for you, and then decide whether you're coming too quickly to stop, that we know it's ahead of you, and then give you the warning. At the same time, if you do a hard brake because somebody is cutting the way in front of you, we take a look at what is happening before you, and that gets recorded. So if you did a hard brake for a good reason, you get promoted for it. I mean, you're not penalized for it. It's a hard braking because it was needed, and you have evidence for that.
Yeah, there's something I think that needs to be brought up too. I'm going to ask you a question. I don't want it to be a loaded question, so you can respectfully just say, you know what, we don't have the data yet to support that, and it would be a valid answer, okay? So I want to be clear, because
Yes.
I really don't know when I ask this if you have the ability to answer it. But I guess what my question is, do you have any kind of data that shows how, I hate to use the word quickly, so I don't want to, so if I were to invest in Drive as a fleet, and I've had issues with fleet safety, specifically careless driving, I've had a couple people nod off or whatever. How long does it take on average for me to start seeing some level of adoption and results once I make the decision to make the investment to put Drive in is our preferred provider?
Yeah, I can give a couple of points. We studied a few drivers in a FedEx fleet that we worked with a while back. Over time, it was say the average driver was focusing on the best driver. The best driver managed to get away from speeding within a few days, almost completely. The distracted warnings kept going on for about a month. So they were reduced, but there was still some. In the second month, things were much better. So some habits are much harder to correct. But if you look at the trend over time, you can see a continuous improvement. You may have a bad day, but overall, if you look at the trend, yes, you go from an 80 score to 85, 87, 88, 90, 95 over time. And typically, those long-term changes tend to be stable. So if once it's like when you lose weight, you lose enough weight for long enough, you manage to keep it. If you lose it too quickly, then chances are they may come back really quickly too. So it depends. Certain aspects are easy to correct. The braking and speeding are the easiest ones. And then you just need to remind the person if 3-4 weeks later the habit comes back, okay, they can be corrected very quickly.
Okay, so two questions. Number one, I'm going to forget the one if I don't ask it first, and it may be a little out of context, but you guys don't know this. I have severe ADHD that I got diagnosed with when I was 40. So like that's a real thing. My question is this. I think it would be really cool, and you may have this as native functionality, but since part of what you're talking about is drowsiness while driving or whatever, does Drive have the ability to send out a push notification to that driver saying, based on your performance yesterday, your recommended bedtime tonight is this, if you're going to get up at this time? Because I have that as a feature in my Apple phone already that I can set my bedtime, but I think that would be really cool if you could add something like that integrates with the native function of the iPhone, because I know that's one of the I have a developer's license to publish apps on the Apple Store, so I understand that they are all about having native functionality of the phone in the applications that you put up. So I thought that would be really cool. That's just sort of an aside, anecdotally. The question that I heard though was you mentioned scores going up and up, and we haven't really talked about scores yet. So I'd like for you guys to talk about what that scoring system looks like. And when you're done, I'm going to tie it back into something that I think every single producer listening to this needs to hear.
Yeah, well, we have two types of scores. I would say the conventional one is based on movements of the vehicle, speeding, braking, cornering. Those are more important parameters. Make sure that the vehicle is operated properly on the road. It doesn't tell you much about the driver. So we have a separate score about the level of attentiveness of the driver. In distracted and drowsy driving are two aspects that we monitor the most. We also have combined scores when, for instance, if you are an expert driver and you want to eat your sandwich and there's nobody before you, you have a clear view for the next half a mile, you can safely look away from the road for 3, 4, 5 seconds even, and the truck stays in lane, and you know there's nothing else, and there's no animals are coming into the road. So whilst I would not recommend it, it's not as risky as when you're driving in bumper-to-bumper traffic and you look away for 2 seconds. So the time to distraction is highly dependent on the amount of traffic that is around you, in front of you, on the side. And we take that into account. So they have separate scores for distraction and driving, but also depending on the traffic conditions. And depending on how much you want to dive into the details, so you can go with the telematics only, or telematics and attention, or combined risk score. We have all three. They are dynamic. They're calculated on the fly, even if the vehicle is not connected. And the driver can be alerted when things are particularly bad or particularly good. You could be an excellent driver. Nobody's patting you on the back saying, hey, you're doing an excellent job. We tell you after 50 minutes of excellent driving, there's a little chirpy note that tells you you won some credits. And then by the end of the trip, we tell you how many credits you accumulated. And then over time, that can lead to some, I don't know, an extra day of vacation or dinner for two or whatever.
Well, so to your point, that's one of the things that we preach when we go in and deal with behavior-based risk management in the companies we engage with. We always want to reward the people for doing the behaviors that we want to see them doing. And we've got some pretty creative examples that we've done over the years. But, Ken Blanchard wrote the book Whale Done decades ago at this point, and that's how they train the killer whales at SeaWorld. You reward the behaviors you want to see replicated. You redirect the behaviors you don't. And, it doesn't need to be a negative thing, but subconsciously, if someone's seeking attention, they're going to replicate the behavior that gets them the attention, and they don't even realize they're doing it. So if you're constantly, it's just like your kids. I've seen it firsthand. If I'm harping at them, saying, don't do that, and I'm being negative about it, they're going to continue to do it because that's how they get dad's attention that they covet. But if I can do the same thing and reward the positive and redirect the negative, they get what they need and I get the result that I want. But to your point, that's one of the things that was running through my mind. And you said it at the very end. If you can show that people are increasing and they're operating at this safe behavior, it's a heck of a lot cheaper to give somebody $25-50 for dinner as a gift card to go out and to make sure they continue to drive safely. Even if they win it every month and it's a $50 prize, it's $600 a year for you to not have claims or have the safest driver possible on the road. It also helps things culturally, not just from the risk management standpoint, but you're going above and beyond and giving something extra to that employee that they may not get someplace else that doesn't take this seriously. It means something to an employee or a driver that you're willing to invest in them being safe, not just by the technology, but also in the monetary or whatever that, swag is that you give them for hitting that. The point that I wanted to make to producers is one that's really simple. We are in the hardest market we've ever seen. Auto does not look like it's getting softer any sooner. I mean, it looks like auto is going to, I can tell you specifically from Florida, auto plans to be a bear for at least another year, if not two. And, when underwriters look at an account of any size, it's not like writing smaller auto policies where it's 3 years of loss runs and that's all they're worried about. They look at 5 years. They want to have the experience rating on it. So if you have an account that's borderline or has a little more hair than somebody would want on it, how powerful would it be for you to take what you just heard Roberto talk about, in that there are some behaviors that are corrected literally in a day or two. Some of them are a little bit longer, but literally you are actively working on correcting those behaviors. But that doesn't stop there. You can represent that and you can say, this is the overall experience of drive, but then you can quantify it by saying, oh, and by the way, here's how we measure that. We score it. The scores continue to go up. We actually have an incentive program for all of our drivers that are at 90 or 95 or whatever it is and above, and we want to make sure we're replicating those. And so while we understand historically that the account probably hasn't performed at the level that you would like to see it perform, these are the investments that ownership and management are willing to make, and they're going to make it in a product that has gotten these results provable over multiple entities in different kinds of fleets. Why wouldn't we be willing to at least give us terms that are reasonable on something like this, knowing we've got something that's got a sort of a predictable track record? That's kind of an oxymoron considering track records past and predictable's future, but you understand what I'm saying. It's predictable at that point to a certain degree. We know what our expectation would be. We're committing to this. And oh, by the way, if it would help, would you like it if we were to update you? And in my firm, we do a monthly risk management action plan update with our clients that need a little bit of hand-holding. And our underwriters, the loss control for the carriers, are on board with this. They're actually in communication and they have responsibilities we assign to them as part of the process. But would it help you if we updated the RMAP every month with the scores of the drivers, so that when you go in and look at the document that governs the relationship we all have with this client, you can see that we're making the forward progress and that we're actually implementing what we committed to do if you were able to give us a reasonable quote?
Yeah, I mean, Roberto, share with us the Tokyo Marine studies that were done.
Yeah, Tokyo Marine and MSAD, two of the three top insurance companies in Japan, made a serious investment over the last couple of years, equipping about 1 million drivers each with dedicated dash cams with cellular connectivity to collect information and provide feedback. So it's sort of a superset of what we have, a little more expensive, but they provided that in cars mostly. And they studied the results. The telematics only operation led to monitoring it and providing feedback, led to a 5% decrease in loss ratio. The additional camera use of both in-cabin and outside led to an additional 15% reduction in loss ratio. So the use of video analysis and especially feedback on the spot to the driver and rewarding is a critical recipe. You have to have all three to make it really happen. If you rely on telematics only and you only monitor, you don't provide any feedback, especially not real time, there's only so much you can obtain. And
this isn't us. This is Tokyo Marine doing it and reporting 20% reduction in loss ratio.
Yeah.
This
is with 1.2 million users for about a year. So it's not just a short study. It's a serious study.
And I would even argue at the agency level, people, if you're not hitting your contingencies and you could make a minor investment into your accounts to improve your own loss ratio to where you can get in the money at bonus time every year, this is worthwhile for you, considering just to make it a mandatory thing inside your agency for every fleet account you bring in. People aren't going to understand it at first. It might be weird. It might be a little bit awkward, but what's new that isn't until it's not awkward anymore? You have to be the one to take the first step and do that. Listen, fellas, we're running up on an hour, so we need to wrap up. I need to make sure we understand how people can get in touch with you. I know obviously connect on LinkedIn and go there, but where can they learn more about Drive? And I want to make sure when you hear what we're saying, you understand the spelling of the company. It's DREYEV, with the EYE being your eyes. And the logo is actually really cool. It tells the whole story. But I just want to make sure for those of you listening to the audio version of this, that it's not DRIVE. It's DREYEV. So where can they go to learn more?
Drive.com.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, we spelled it out for you. No need to do it again, everybody. Listen, Frank, Roberto, Giancarlo, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your insight. I appreciate more what you're doing to equip people like me and the audience of this podcast to go out and win more deals, but more importantly, drive more change for the positive in the accounts that we represent. Being able to make commission or take a service fee to go in and advise somebody is one thing, but actually knowing that you changed the culture of an organization and made them a better employer and a safer place to work, that should carry some weight for you too. So think about that as you meet with fleet accounts. Know that you have resources in your back pocket that you can use to improve them. And I would encourage everybody to go out and check out drive.com today. We'll catch you guys next time. See ya.
Thank you.